And try to make your beneficiaries of your motivation as broad as possible. Really combine the wish that your efforts this evening will benefit those around you. Come on. Had a lot of trouble lately. Sometimes I think
Would you
my,
like me to share it?
huh?
Would you like me to share it?
No, I just would like this window to move. And sometimes I feel like I have no heat in my hands or something, like the trackpad's not listening to me.
Can't do it without a mouse. I can't do it without, I don't do very well with the pads myself.
It's just so stupid. I love when I get impatient with an inanimate object. Talk about so stupid. It's just like ridiculous. But I don't know why it won't move. I don't even know why it's green. Well, at least it's somewhere. Okay, y'all can see it. Maybe I just won't move it. Okay. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of samsara. Oh, yeah. For living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. Refuge prayer. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit sentient beings. So weird. Okay. So what do you think?
I think these are really challenging times.
Yeah. Today I was really thinking about how layered karma is. You think about all the different things that have to come together for positive things to occur in our lives, or in this moment or whatever, as well as, negative things. And then you look at the world and there's so many people and so many things happening and all varieties. And we share, like the karmic result of being born on this planet. So it's just wild to think about all the different actions from the past that are ripening now. I mean, and that's true in every moment and every moment, every moment, every moment. So, but it's just pretty wild it's not a surprise then that only a Buddha can know all the workings of karma. Because you'd really have to be able to have all knowledge. You'd have to know everything that's ever happened, everything that's happening right now, in order to be able to see, well, how did this ripen now? So, so we have to really work on our ability to develop confidence in the law of cause and effect without being able to have proof directly until we're Buddhists. I mean, it's a little sooner than that in terms of being able to get a better sense of it. Like if you develop karma biting, you can start to remember your past lives if you haven't before then. So it's, because of your concentration, your ability to recall becomes better. So, and then as you progress along as your mind gets more and more tuned, you have access to more and more and more information. So, but since we don't have proof, what can we rely on?
Evidence.
And what kind of evidence?
Well, if you like this scientific method, if you try something and it works, then that's evidence. It's not proof, but
Well,
if you try compassion and you get happier.
do you think there's that karma's instant?
No.
Yeah, you see, there's a little problem with that. It's
Yeah,
Is the
with
problem
respect to
with
karma.
anecdotal evidence.
But there is evidence. I mean, if you live a violent life, chances are something violent is going to happen to you. So that's kind of evidence that karma's, I mean, and people that look, but it's not always the case.
why isn't it always the case? Because it's always the case in the big view. You step back and if you can see all the things that have happened, it actually you will be able to see how it worked. But what makes it difficult in any given life to be able to, I think there's a lot of truth in what Jack is saying about, like, if you practice compassion, you find yourself more content, you start to realize, oh, my mind, well, at least you start to realize your mind matters. Your attitude of mind is going to make a difference, but it doesn't mean that you'll necessarily have good things ripen for yourself in this life.
But a part of it is we don't know what causes and conditions are necessary to ripen the seed in any given lifetime. But something we don't, Buddhists know that.
Right. But also, so we have to look at it in reverse. How can we use what our baby understanding of the teachings to help us develop confidence? I mean, one is things like when you put into practice certain things, you feel better.
Just observe yourself.
So just
Observe your
observe it. Yep. But what is that basing it on?
Well, some of it's basing it on, I mean, just listening to the Buddha Dharma. If you've put some of the Buddha's practices into practice and they work, then your faith grows that what he's telling you about these other things
Right.
is real.
So that's part of it. It's like, when you investigate other teachings that are not hidden kind of thing, karma, trying to really understand karma, we don't have enough information to have proof. But we have a couple of things that we do have. We do have physical cause and effect that we all see all the time. So we do know there's cause and effect. We just have to drop a glass and watch it break. know that there's some relationship there. So it's, but it doesn't always happen, does it? I mean, it may always happen in Florida because we have all these tile floors. But trust me, I've dropped glasses that didn't
But we
break.
have plastic.
Well, you got plastic, but also I've dropped glass, tumblers that, just didn't break. It's like, wow, that's amazing. So that's one way we can see the truth of cause and effect in the physical objects, you know. So when we bring consciousness into it, it gets a little trickier because we can't know all the layers of what's going on in our mind that something can ripen in this life that seems totally unrelated to our behavior in this life.
Why is it totally unrelated to our behavior in this life?
Because what we experience in this life is mostly the results from previous lives.
Right.
Is that talking? I mean, is one part of that your nature as like just being born here, like you're a different person, like that's from the past lives.
Every aspect of our life, both our birth here, blah, 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 is a result from previous actions. Very little is a result from our actions in this life.
But I meant like our unique habits that we come in.
You think we
this
have
life.
some?
We have some already kind of from previous lives, right?
Yeah, so that's one thing.
That's evidence that there is like past lives. There is.
Yeah, and now everybody buys into that. But, certainly if to me, the fact that children of the same family can be very different from each other, even though they have the same parents, they live in the same house, they have the same resources kind of thing, all that's kind of level. And they even have their differences even when they're tiny. It's not just when they become teenagers. It's, from they have different habits. And I think that's now some people just, I don't know what they think it's just genetic or something, but I don't know what they think because it makes no sense to me. Karma makes sense to me, so it's kind of hard sometimes to think outside of that box. But one of the things they teach that the Buddha taught is that I don't know if the Buddha taught it or maybe it was his disciples that taught it, is that you look at the trustworthiness of the other advice of the Buddha. And if you find that, that seems to be good information, then why would we lie about karma? So, sometimes we have to use that support. It's like if you haven't had a realization of emptiness about how things actually exist, we kind of have to take the experts, like, oh, well, it sounds like they might be onto something there, but we rely on what we see ourselves do and think and change and da 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 to see if there's any change in our experiences. And what's really nice about that is that our states of mind, although we've developed the habits in this continuum for eons, we can directly affect the next moment of our mind. We don't have to wait for some future condition. We can create the condition from working on our mind. May not have any effect on external things happening or not happening to us. Might, but it may not.
I find that studying, meditating, listening to teachings,
The party line, yeah.
There's a positive reinforcement that it's made a difference to me and how I
Has it changed whether you get flat tires or not?
It's changed the way I approach life.
Yes. And see, that's the key here. Working with our minds helps us respond in new ways to what happens. Doesn't change our control over what happens. It changes our,
And how much I suffer, or make myself suffer.
do you hear what you're saying though?
The way I react,
That's all your mind.
right?
That's what we have control over. What I'm saying, but karma's ripening with our red lights that we catch, our flat tires, our running into people we don't like, all those things.
And studying the Dharma and karma helps me react better.
But that's the thing that we do have control over. What it's ripening external to our minds, we don't have control over.
Right.
Well, that's the whole point I'm making.
And I wasn't I wasn't meaning to contradict that.
No, you're just not answering the question. So the question is, we really need to develop this understanding about karma, about the fact that we have an impact on our future resources, our future, good stuff coming our way, and our negative stuff coming our way through how we behave from moment to moment, right? What's ripening in this life, it's already happened. We can't go back and change history. We can entirely change our response to it. But it doesn't mean we won't, lose all our money or our house won't burn down or, all those kind of things just because now we're a good person and we treat everybody well. What is that trying to help us with, that fact?
It's trying to help us that we're not going to get instant gratification.
We're not going to get instant gratification. We cannot control outcomes.
Accepting impermanence too, I think.
Yeah, accepting impermanence. Absolutely. But so my point is we get very attached to outcomes. I mean, it's a habit we've got, And so sometimes when we're trying to, work with our minds or whatever, we haven't lessened our grip on outcomes. And I've seen people, like I've seen people who've lost a child to death, and it turns them away from their faith. She was a wonderful child. There's no way she could have possibly created the cause to get killed in a car accident at the age of 22. Now, you don't have a discussion with someone who's just experienced that. But we can learn from that first of all, do we know that it's a bad thing for that person to have died at age 22?
It's all relative.
We have no idea what their next life is. We don't end just because this body gets smashed. So what's really important are those habits of mind that the parent is thinking about, saying, they're wonderful people. Yeah, well, that's going to bode well for what was in our mind at the time of death and what will ripen in the future.
It's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
I know of couples who have either had miscarriages or early on, and so they have the belief system that was the incarnation that was important for that particular moment in time. It's hard to imagine later in life when you have a child and experience that you could possibly.
But we can. But yes, I agree with you. You have to really be very far along in your practice. And nothing about the teachings say it doesn't hurt.
Okay.
A loss of a loved one hurts. That's good news. We want to, have people in our lives, but how we hurt can be different than what we usually imagine. And that might not occur for any parent losing a child, because I think that's got to be the worst. But one of the things that, and the only reason I'm bringing this up, I don't know why I'm bringing it up, but is this idea that how little we know about outcomes. Like when the Tibetans are asked, well, what do you think about euthanasia for your pets? And usually they go, well, you do know that's killing. Killing's not recommended. So, but one of the main reasons is they say you have no idea what their next life's going to be. So you really don't know if you're ending their suffering or if you're speeding up their next miserable rebirth. That's really hard to get your head around, isn't it?
But it's not their fault that they got euthanized. Why would it affect their next rebirth?
Because
It's the person that, or the.
there's nobody can be euthanized who didn't create the cause for it.
Okay.
Every
Sure.
single thing we experience is a ripening of our karma. But there's lots of karmas ripening in that moment. That's why you can't tease it all out. But I can't experience something that someone else creates a cause for. Now, the person who euthanizes their pet creates a certain cause. It could be great compassion, that they really genuinely knew that their pet was suffering, as we know our pets very well, and was relieving them of suffering. And their motivation was pure. There was none of that. I'm sorry, I just can't take care of them. I have to work full time and, and they're so sick, I just can't take care of them. That's self-interest, so we have to have a pure motivation, and you can have one where you just really do not want to see this suffering anymore, not for yourself, but for the animal. So it isn't that it's not possible to do that where the motivation's pure. But that person who does it with a pure motivation is getting some merit for their love and concern and compassion for their pet, right? The pet is being killed. That's a different chain of causation. So the mind of the pet is peaceful and calm and all that stuff. He's just exhausting some negative karma that's ripening. An early death or a painful death or whatever it is, no big deal in terms of their karma. Because that's one thing we also want to remember. So is that when a seed ripens, it exhausts. So that's the part where you can rejoice. Oh, how wonderful. I've got pneumonia. Yep.
Okay.
I was just gonna follow up with about what you said. It exhausts, meaning that it can't ripen again.
That's seed. We place a seed every moment of mind. 65. So it's just one seed. That's also important to keep in mind. It doesn't take all your past killing karma and all ripen in that one moment of being killed. It's one.
So a single thought can result in a single ripening, and then
Yeah, it can. It has to be a very powerful, everything has to be complete. You have to have you have to have all the parts have to be complete. So you have to have the basis, in other words, an object of whatever your action is. You have to have, you have to follow through on the action, you have to do the action. The action has to be complete before you die, So in a fist fight, if both people die, the person who died last gets the worst karma. So yeah, it's kind of, this is why we want to purify every night. So we just clean them up as fast as we can. But the point isn't that, oh, just one at a time. This is why we have to realize emptiness. Because when you realize emptiness directly, you are eliminating all those seeds. It starts with the greatest of the lower, you get through 7 grounds and all your afflictive obscurations are gone. They can never ripen again. You don't have them anymore, basically. Then you have to get rid of all the little leftover taints. And then when that's done after 8, 9, and 10 grounds, you're a Buddha. And you're not going to have any seeds to ripen then. Karmic things only happen in samsara. It's about the law of cause and effect in samsara, in cyclic existence. Enlightened beings are out of that. Liberated beings are out of that. And it doesn't come back. What?
So burning through all your bad karma, per se, is not necessarily the path to Buddhahood.
No,
It's realizing emptiness and
Yes.
other things.
It's realizing emptiness.
Yeah.
So you have method and wisdom, right? So wisdom is this direct realization of emptiness, this direct perception of it, where you don't no longer have ignorance obscuring your wisdom. Okay. Method is creating the merit to remove your obstacles to this realization. So all ethics, kindness, patience, helping others, joyous effort, all those things help us remove the obstacles to seeing things as they are. Because that is the great obscurer. Our ignorance is what, blinds us, to how things actually are. And that's why we have all these disturbing emotions. Oh no, if I get what I want, then I'll be happy. So I'll be greedy and I'll be selfish and I'll be, I'll just take what I want when I want it. I'm going for power because that's the way to become happy. Wrong. Oh yeah.
Why do you think that we decided it's okay to put animals out of their misery, but not humans?
That's my theory. That's why I don't do it. But we're doing it now, so who knows? It's changed.
No, I'm saying, I wonder, I never thought of the distinction, but now that you raise it,
I don't know if she's saying that.
Well, I know that my reasoning for why I wouldn't do it, and I don't have a pet, and this is one of the reasons I don't have a pet. You want to talk?
Sorry.
So, is because if I wouldn't do it to a human baby, why would I do it to anybody else? So it just doesn't make sense to me. But I do understand why people do choose to do that. But I don't know if it's a good move or not. But again, I think maybe it's because I have doubt over my ability to have pure motivation. To really be doing it from compassion and love for the animal, not for the fact that I can't watch it.
I've been very fortunate.
That's good.
All my animals have just died,
Yeah.
except for the ones that my wife killed. Well, my wife, yeah, she'll put them to sleep, but if she's not there, if it's just there with me, they don't wake up.
Yeah. Oh, that is.
I've been fortunate.
Yeah. But that's probably due to some past action that you don't have to make that choice. So there's no easy, just like I've always maintained, there isn't a right answer. It depends on motivation. It depends on the mind of all the beings involved, all that kind of stuff. So, we have these things like, oh, killing is non-virtuous. It's a natural natural negativity, which just means that nobody wants to be killed. No sentient being just goes, oh, my turn. That's not what happens. Even what amoebas or something, they run away from. That's an exaggeration. Run is probably not. They try to avoid the tweezers or whatever. So, but my point is that it's working on our minds is the thing we can do, and noticing, being very clear, that that's the only thing we really can know, because we can watch our minds. We can start to see the clues in our body. We can start to figure out when we're lying to ourselves, and we can find our self-interest, so that we can, whenever I get that little hook that says, I'm not happy, or I just, something's off. The first thing I do is look for, where am I in this picture? There's something about it that I'm not comfortable with, whether it's fear or whether it's just greed or whatever. And then once I find where I am in that picture, it becomes very easy to make a better decision. Once I have all the information, there's nothing wrong with making decisions that have your interest in it. It's more, though, you want to make sure that you're not trying to manipulate things to get what you want, and you're not trying to, there are all sorts of ways that we, try to get, we use our language, our speech, our body language to try to get what we want. And so and sometimes we realize, oh, it's not that I think this is the best thing to do. It's just what I want to do. Oh, so we want to be able to clean that kind of stuff up. So then you can kind of go, okay, if I wasn't in the picture, what would my idea about it be? Now, that doesn't matter about going to the movies, but it matters in a board meeting or, whatever. So it's being and eventually if you keep watching yourself, you really have trouble hiding. You can kind of, oh, I have a sneaking suspicion that this is all about me, and you can clean it up.
So when suffering happens, but maybe in time, you kind of are able to take a lesson from it and you grow from it and it becomes sort of a good thing. Would that initial suffering still be considered negative karma, or at that point could it be cast as
Suffering
positive
is
karma?
suffering is the result of a negative action ripening. Okay, does not mean that we don't use that in positive ways. Almost all of us have had horrible experience happen in our lives. It turned out the best thing that ever happened to us because we learned something big from it. It really changed the direction we took in life. It did this or did that. So, I mean, it's like, it has nothing to do with how we use it. This is the positive side of suffering, you could say, is that can teach us how to avoid actions that result in suffering, which is an example, like you're saying, so, this is the good news. And fortunately, we all already have that habit. We learn things as we grow up and we kind of go, this is a choice. Do I really want to repeat that? So we can learn from that. But if you're doing things not for your peace of mind, but for some outcome, some external outcome, which you don't have any control over, then you could change all sorts of ways of thinking, all sorts of action, blah, 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 blah. But then on the 997th time that you don't get the outcome you want, you go, well, this is ridiculous. It obviously doesn't work. Well, never was about that. Because all of the things, all the results of our actions are, like we talk about how generosity brings resources. And then you want to really learn how you want to refine your generosity so that you can also direct yourself towards resources that, like meeting Dharma, having teachers in the future, blah, 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 that kind of thing. But having resources is only needed in samsara. Buddhists don't need resources. They don't need anything. And it's all about our mind. It's all about our response to things in our mind. Yeah.
Is this why in the end, there's no such thing as truly good and bad?
Because that's only really valid in
Samsara.
samsara.
Yeah.
Because nobody who's out of samsara does anything that harms anybody. Because that's what gets you stuck at samsara. That's self-interest. Apparently, when you have this direct realization of emptiness, you simply see there's nothing to cling to. That all this is literally just a massive story we're creating from our past actions, completely driven by self-grasping.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yep.
And is that why when you try to dictate what other people should be doing with their lives, like, oh, this is how you should be doing this, is that another reason, I guess, why that's not seen as a good act to do?
Well, you're trying to control something that's not under your control.
Because you're asserting your sense of what's right or whatever.
You have no clue what's right for someone else. Now, it's okay that in samsara that we have to guard against certain actions. It's okay that we say, okay, you keep killing people, we're going to remove you from people. That's just logic. Human life's valuable because humans can become enlightened. This is like a really good rebirth. So we need to understand our limits. When we start thinking that I know what's best for you, you don't have any idea what's in their mind. They could be bodhisattvas, they could be Buddhas already. And they're trying to help you see something that hopefully you will not do. So it's obviously when you're raising children, you have a responsibility to help them learn and try to figure out how to get along and all those kinds of things. That's one of the big sacrifices of parents. You really have a huge responsibility there. And it's never done. They're always your children. So, but when we start trying to direct other people's lives, when we're not their parents, we're not, that's usually about self-interest. It's very hard to get away from, there's something in this for me. I will like you better if you act. Please don't embarrass me in public. Change how you're acting. We have all sorts of, we and they're not conscious thoughts. It just comes from this discomfort. Like if, do you remember as a teenager being embarrassed by your parents at any time, sometime, somewhere, and you kind of, that icky feeling is all about you. Oh, please, I don't want to be known as your child in this moment. That's how it comes about. So when we're trying to dictate to someone else, sometimes, yes, it's from genuine concern and thinking that, you know, that there is a right answer here, and this does not mean like drug addiction might be a good idea for one person. That's not what this means. It means that you helping them has to be skillful, because they have to make that decision. Yeah.
How do we truly understand our own rebirth from that perspective?
Okay. So your own rebirth, you can tell a lot about your mind at the moment of death in your previous life by your life now. You're born into, if you're born into I don't know, a family that has some resources, that you had access to things like food, shelter, education, blah blah blah. That's a sense that you had some generosity in the past. That everybody who's a human being was practicing ethics in some way, because that's one of the root causes of being born human.
What about the example of being born into a really controlling environment?
Well, that probably means that's one of your not so fine qualities. I've decided that I must have been a chauvinistic dentist who couldn't care less about other people's pain in a previous life. Because I was born to a very chauvinistic man, and I've had nothing but teeth problems my whole life that caused terrible pain. My first dentist wasn't even a dentist, he was a charlatan. I had 13 cavities the first time I went to a real dentist. One root canal, maybe more than that. Anyway, that's how you can, and we're a mixed bag. We're not all just good stuff, and we're not all this bad stuff. We are a mixture of things. And what we've practiced the most of in recent lives determines what happens next. That's why our habits are so important. So what we practice, this is why a good, fortunate rebirth is helpful, because we have pretty good conditions with which to develop good habits. And that will serve us well at the time of death. And then, you get another one, another good rebirth. So you can look at your life now, and then you can also look at so if you want to prepare for the future, you have to look at your actions in this life and your body, speech, and mind. And that helps determine what your mind at the time of death will be like. And this is why being able to develop compassion for people, just people, just understanding we're all messed up, we don't know what we're doing, blah, 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 can help you if someone decides to shoot you. Because if your first response isn't hatred, that's going to help you if you die in that moment. So the more that we just can understand that people's disturbing emotions reflect their past actions and what they're doing in this life, their circumstances, all those things. Our response to it is what determines our future, not the fact that we're getting shot. That's just some bad karma writing that we created. The other person's creating it in that moment. For his, they're going to suffer in the future. So that's why having compassion, not only for people who are being harmed, but having compassion for people who are doing the harming, is a really good mind to practice. Because we're stuck with all of them. None of these consciousnesses cease. They have a continuum too. We want everybody to be able to get ahead of their disturbing emotions. And compassion is a far more skillful response to anything than judgmental, you're evil. Their action might be evil. And you hope you don't want someone to end up being so far down that road that they have no positive thoughts in this life. But that's got to be rare.
Do you have any advice for, within cultivating compassion? Sometimes when I'm trying to like meditate on that, I just start feeling bad for everybody and then I feel worse, you know? Um,
Or you,
yeah.
no self-interest there.
Yeah, but
That's
how do
one
I
of
get
the
around that self-interest?
you have to not let that be your primary concern, and we have to understand that we have limits, right? It is sad. We look at all sorts of conditions, and it's painful to see how much harm we do to each other. But we need to include ourselves in that picture. If we've ever been harmed, it's because we harmed others. We are not absent from this picture. So having compassion for ourselves, oh, I'm sorry I ever treated someone that way, because boy, I know how it feels, because they're doing it to me now. Having compassion, they are setting themselves up for experiencing that kind of harm in the future. So the more we can just understand that judging actions, is the only appropriate thing to judge, and only in the sense of, oh, I'm not going to do that. And if you're a judge or a policeman, you have, you're helping to protect society. But this idea that the person doing it is somehow worse than you, that's not really logical. You can instead have great compassion for whatever circumstances have ripened for them in this life, that this is something they think is a normal thing to do or an appropriate response to something. Because that's really sad. I feel very fortunate in this life that I can't even, I mean, I have never had any interest in this life in picking up a gun. I didn't take rifle at camp, there's no interest whatsoever. And I'm really grateful for that. Is the further we remove ourselves from these instruments of harm, the less likely a condition will be there for us to use one. So, it's like to me, it's easy to imagine that predators in the animal world, you know, may have had the experience of being soldiers in this world and as a human in some past rebirth. And you get accustomed to killing. You get the skills of killing, all those snipers. Anyway, so the key thing to remember here is that the more we habituate ourselves to positive states of mind, the more likely it is we'll have one at the time of death. Whether it's equanimity, oh, so this is what it's going to look like. And you'd be surprised how, in those surprising kind of things, like, I would not have guessed this. Oh, and that's good. That's the kind of response you want to have. If you're fortunate enough to just live out old age and not have anything horrible, be inflicted upon you, you really want to not grasp to this life. It's like, okay, it must be my turn because we're impermanent. So the more of a peace of mind, kind mind, loving mind we can have even at the time of death. And how did we have that? By practicing in all those other moments. And this is another great sacrifice of parents, because parents worry about their children at the time of death. Are they going to be okay? So you want to, so you want to separate your uh, wishes for them from clinging, because after all, your time's done. Worrying won't make it better. So you want to try to take care of business beforehand, but there'll be things left undone. But this is why they, Lama Zopa Rinpoche emphasized how if you're really distraught over someone's death or dying, they're dying in their dying process, leave the room during those times. Go back in when you're more peaceful, because that peaceful energy is better for that person, other than weeping and clinging. Not easy to do, I mean, yeah. But it's that same thing. We don't want to be a condition for someone else's clinging. Okay, so we talk about something light.
I thought this was light. No.
Yeah, no, when I came back from the pilgrimage,
Right.
after doing all that good stuff, I had a flat tire and a dead battery.
What's so funny is they say that if you create lots of merit, then you will have things that would normally ripen in the hell realms ripen in this life.
Yeah.
Like things like a flat tire
And a dead battery.
and a dead battery.
That's exactly what my life has been like. The more I learn, the more bad things occur.
Mhm.
My response to it is the thing that changes.
See, that's the thing. A lot of Westerners, when they ordain, they get sick. They get some chronic illness. It's like, sorry, you've used up all your merits. So, because when you think about causes and conditions, it's not easy for a Westerner to have the causes and conditions come together to become a Buddhist monastic. It's just, I just think it's outrageous. I can't believe the karma that ripened. So to me, it's like I always want to try to have gratitude for the previous caretaker of my mind, and then I'm hoping to take good care of this mind stream for the next caretaker. So, but I just encourage this. None of you may have this clinging to outcomes. It's just a very common. So it's just important to remember that's something we don't have control over. And in fact, if you're generating a lot of merit, you may have all sorts of things go wrong. And our teachers would go, rejoice, rejoice. Well, I'm burning up some more negative karma, Excellent, excellent. And that's why you want to practice when you go to sleep at night, after you rejoice about your good actions during the day, after you've purified your negative actions during the day. You want to go to sleep with a mind that says, oh, can't wait to the next moment when I can benefit others. So it doesn't matter which life it is. In general, it's a good way to approach things like sleep, because you go through the similar dissolution. So it's a good time to practice this idea of, oh, my body's sinking into the bed. I have no control over my limbs, And then you get paralyzed in sleep, So it's kind of all very interesting. But so using meditation as you go to sleep is helpful to practice a mind that isn't scared of death. That's sort of looking forward to the next adventure. And, wanting it to be one that you could keep practicing the path. And this is only if you haven't, created the cause, you're born in a pure land. I always wish for that first. If not a Pure Land, then a good human rebirth. So it's, when you're trying to get this big view of being able to step back, it really is about method and wisdom. Method being skillful means. Skillful means meaning that you need merit in order to remove obstacles to everything. You know, you need to recognize cause and effect. That being stingy just means you're not going to have many resources in the future. Being unkind means a lot of people are not going to be kind to you in the future. Being impatient, you know, not a good attitude to have because it's all about you. Impatience is just about you. Not being able to tolerate not what you want in that moment. The more serious kind of patience is the kind of patience that doesn't retaliate when you're harmed. And that's like, oh, I'm getting shot in the face, and having compassion for the person. Boy, do you not know what you're getting into. I have a friend whose son was killed in a bar fight. So two people in their 20s, and they get stabbed in this bar fight. And his response to it was to have, so much compassion for the other kid. His kid had just, exhausted his karma, blah, blah, blah. But, but he knew the other kid was just in the same kind of circumstances as his son, and just lost his presence, in some caught up some stupid thing and is going to go to prison and is going to, all this kind of terrible stuff, So he was interviewed on camera, like within 30 minutes of the killing, I go, oh, I feel such sorrow for this young man about, what's going to happen to him. That takes practice, But that practice comes from really reflecting on that we're all in the same boat. We literally don't know what we're doing, how to become, end our suffering. We don't get that we're interdependent, interconnected, that our actions towards each other are the most important actions. And that includes our pets and insects and everything else. And we can use our reasoning to be able to say, okay, why does it matter if I don't kill ants on the sidewalk? So what do you know about cause and effect? Why does it matter if that you don't kill ants when you walk on the sidewalk?
They don't Tibetan Buddhists always say, it could be your mother. You don't want to kill your mother.
Right, that's one of them.
They don't want to be killed.
Huh?
They don't want to be killed.
They don't want to be killed. That's another.
You're not supposed to kill them. So that's a
Oh, that's not going to work in
Oh, yeah.
when you hate them. You want to really be able to take little examples and go, what if these were babies in baskets in the river? Would I really think it's a pain in the ass to have to slow down and be very careful as I maneuver through the river to not harm any of these babies in little baskets? Why should I value the ant less than the baby? They're both somebody's baby. Now, yes, it's true that harming the baby, because it's a human baby, has a much stronger karmic negative effect because it can't become enlightened in this lifetime. You're really harming the future of that, of what could happen, the potential in this life. But killing the ant out of what? Impatience. Oh God, what pain in the neck. Look at all these ants. It's like you know, when you're driving along the road and all those white birds all of a sudden decide it's time to cross the street, you know, and it's really easy to stop, you know, and you're so happy when the other lane stops too. And then finally they go across, you know, blah, 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 blah. Well, the answer the same way, you know, we want, you know, that we want to treat all sentient beings as if they're our own precious child. That's the mind we're hoping to develop. And so being able to choose that, you know, I'm at least going to make the effort. I bring up ants because in Australia, the path from the, you know, the Gampa to our, whatever you call those things, bedrooms, had a million ants on the sidewalk.
The dormitory?
Well, no, it wasn't a dorm.
Oh.
It was better than that. Thank
Oh.
goodness, because us Westerners just wouldn't like that. So, but you know, so I had to really work on my mind. I had to go, you're a nun, you know, just even let go of the idea of just being able to ignore these ants on the path. You didn't sign up because you just wanted it to be, you know, convenient. You know, you need to go, okay, this is one of those little minor little things. So get with the program, you know. And then you get to be so happy because it would not occur to you to kill something out of convenience. I like that change, you know, where, oh, something's itching on my neck. I don't slap it. What if it's a being? You know? So it's this, I'm glad my mind has changed in that direction. Is it a big deal? No, it's not a big deal. But it's the same as controlling your anger, you know? It's like an unchecked moment of anger becomes what in a couple of eons? Let's go to war. You know, we need to see the, you know, that my desire to kill something just because I can, or because it's little and who cares, and because they bite me, you know, well, you know, let's make lampshades out of these people. You know, they have no value. That's what that kind of mind grows to. So recognize, I said I was going to bring up something cheerful, and this isn't it. And this isn't about
Actually, it is very cheerful.
what, because we're figuring out a way out.
I mean, seriously, it is very cheerful. It's very, very hopeful.
I agree. So then we want to look at, you know, people that you admire or you think are just so kind or just, gosh, you wish you had their courage. You know, these kind of people, you want to think, what does that involve? What good qualities do I need to cultivate in order to be able to do that? So what's courage about?
Fear.
Lack
of fear.
No, I think you have to be afraid to have courage.
Yeah.
And that's part of the deal. If you're not afraid, you don't need courage.
Doing it anyway. Conquering those fears.
Hmm.
Conquering your fears.
No, that's about you.
Doing it anyway because it's important.
Right.
It's not about you, it's furthering some idea or helping others.
So like Tenzin Palmo, you know, here she goes into a cave for 12 years, you know. 1 year she didn't even get food because it was snowed in. The person who normally brought up the supplies, the annual supplies, wasn't able to make it. So it is so important that I work on my mind in order to get closer to realizations that I'm going to set aside my fears for this, you know, in order to work on my mind in better condition, because it is pretty good conditions to work on your mind, to have no responsibilities outside of that, of just doing that and, feeding yourself and getting yourself out of a snowbank, all that kind of stuff. So it means that you're putting something else ahead of your own, the normal things that we worry about. That self-grasping that says, oh yeah, but what if I die? Well, it doesn't matter. You're working on your mind. You'll keep that part, you know. So it's, all of these good qualities are about setting ourselves aside and doing something else for the benefit of someone else. When it's working on your mind, it can be for the benefit of all sentient beings. That's a pretty good motivation. So it isn't that you always have to be doing something directly to benefit someone, every moment of the year, because you have to work on your mind. In order to develop the mind that's going to be able to skillfully actually help others, you have to perfect that mind. So you will need the time it takes to do that. And that is alone time. Yep.
So when you're doing that, does it make the Buddhists happy?
That's what they say, but I think the Buddhists are happy anyway.
Tendron?
Well, if that's true,
Yeah.
then you would be benefiting the Buddhists too.
They don't need benefit. Yep. How?
Yeah. So, I don't
RFG.
know. Yeah, I don't know why, but the quality of humility
Mm-hmm.
seems to, in my mind, I don't quite know how to put it into words, tied to this idea. I mean, not humility in the sense of like really self-effacing and abnegation, but just taking up less space, your own taking up less space that allows for others.
Well, yeah, that's this idea of recognizing we're interdependent, interconnected, and our arrogance, thinking that we are better than, even our arrogance of thinking we're less than, because usually then we want to be the best at being less than, is not making space. It's all about you, Being humble allows you to recognize, oh my goodness, first of all, I can learn from others. I don't know everything. There are people who are further along than I am, and also everybody counts. So that's really, I think that's so important, is to be able, this is where humility is so important, to be able to recognize that you're just one of many. You count, but everybody counts. So sometimes we have made commitments and obligations that mean we can't go off for 6 months, to try to develop our concentration because we have children to raise, or we have to help feed the family, or we have to whatever. Or our parents are ill, or So sometimes we just we haven't got enough merit to be able to take that time off. Like Datsuma had tremendous support from her mother. Her mother really encouraged her. That's merit. There's, oh, you want to follow the Buddhist path, and you live in the West, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
So these, I don't know if they're called virtues, to be courageous, to be humble. It's not truly meritorious to practice them if it's for the wrong intention.
You can still get results, like generosity brings resources. But if you have a really lousy motivation for it, it's not going to bring you the Dharma.
Yeah, like say someone is giving a speech in front of people. They're overcoming their fear and they're being courageous, but their speech is about something that's horrible. They're like lying to people or whatever.
Well, then their motivation may not have been about, I'm going to set aside my fear in order to help others.
So the motivation is just as important, or is it the only thing?
It's just as important, and it's one of the main important pieces. And this is why I say, like with euthanasia, you really have to know yourself well enough to see if there's any self-interest sneaking in. Now, who does that protect? You. Obviously, if you don't kill something, it's also protecting them. But it's, that's one of these, that's really about the main beneficiary of becoming a bodhisattva is you. Until we become a Buddha and can, without error, help others. This is why we have to accomplish our own welfare in order to benefit others. In the meantime, we find the path to bliss. What a drag. So it's not, so this is one of the reasons why, it's really okay to set yourself aside, because it's a win-win situation. You can't lose by cherishing others. It's not that, I'm not going to get anything out of the deal. It's not like that. All of our happiness is interdependent. It matters how we treat each other. It matters. It's like people often ask me things like, and I'm not like an expert here, just, but what's my view on things like, does it matter how we act in samsara, like protecting this planet? That's a big deal to me, the environment and how we haven't done such a good job, and if you look at it as, well, it's just a projection of samsara, you could easily just fall into that sort of, doesn't matter what I do, because I can't fix samsara, which is true. You can't fix samsara. Samsara is the nature of suffering. And we can't fix that. Even Buddhists can't fix it, or it would be done. So, but does it matter how we treat the planet? Why?
It's a living environment.
Right. Countless sentient beings are harmed by what we're doing to this planet. So our actions matter. It doesn't matter if we can control the outcome. That doesn't matter. What matters is we do actions of body, speech, and mind according to what we think is positive. And and if you don't know, you try to, you follow the teachings. You don't do any harm. And so I think Jean's right about this, this idea of humility, of just understand, because one of the things we constantly remember is we are not Buddhas yet. And so we're limited in what we can do, which is why, trying to direct someone else's life is a questionable, we have to really, really check up. Obviously, it's one thing to share what works for you. It's one thing to teach someone something because you're a teacher, blah, blah, blah. It's another thing saying, I know what's best for because, you might be wrong. And not only that, you're probably wrong because you're basing it on you, not them, because you can't know the mind of them. Them's a much bigger group. So we're trying at this stage, I mean, if you are who you appear to be, you're probably, well, Buddha's going, when is she going to get with the program?
No,
You wouldn't tell me the truth.
I'm telling you the truth.
This is the program.
Hmm?
This is the program.
This is the program. So we need a good rebirth. What gives us a good rebirth? We need to know about cause and effect. So we need, we want how we treat each other matters. Doing no harm is particularly important because that's what ethics really means in Buddhism. It's that you have no wish to harm. You try to clean up all your stuff to do no harm to others. Is it possible to do no harm in samsara?
No,
Why?
because you're in samsara. I mean, you're gonna.
Well, we can't
kill-
fix samsara.
Yeah, you're gonna kill things. You're gonna.
Yeah, this is one of those really tricky. But I remember my teacher in Australia said, "You better have a good dharma motivation for getting in that car. Don't think you're not killing the whole time you're driving." And it was really, and he was, of course, talking to monks and nuns. That was his, there were other people there, but that's really was his target. Is here you've taken this lifestyle, so keep these things in mind. Don't go driving around just because the only thing with air condition is the car. How do I know about that? Because sometimes we would get go out and drive around for ice cream or something, anything, because nothing was air conditioned where we were. And it was hot. But this is that kind of thing. Oh, okay. So our teachers try to help us, And I can tell you, I never saw Lama Zopa Rinpoche do anything that had anything to do with anything but benefiting others. Never saw him ask for a cup of tea, cup of water, nothing. Never, not once. Oh, so it can be done. Or every moment of your day is directed towards how can I be of benefit. It's very cool to be in the presence of someone like that. And it looks differently, depending on what the scope of the person's sphere of influence is. But it's so that had no relevance to anything. But what you don't want to do is get so uptight about the fact that every moment matters that you can't function. We have to accept this is a humility. We are limited. We don't know the exactly right thing to do, and that's okay. What we're doing is working on developing the mind that will eventually know exactly what to do. But understanding cause and effect, understanding that we need merit in order to remove the obstacles to realizing emptiness, realizing how things actually exist. So it's not just you need wisdom. It's not just that you needed to be meditating on emptiness. You also need merit to remove the obstacles. A, to have time to meditate on emptiness. B, to have a clue what it means. All that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So an inner inkling to be drawn towards something that is right, a right action. Does that more have to do with a past life, the cultivation of that, or is it something you're developing now?
Both. It can be both. Like one of the reasons that we're probably attracted to coming to a Dharma teaching, is past life something. Like some people meet the Dharma by they go into a bookstore, they just happen to pull out a book. My first book was Being Peace by Thich Nhat Hanh, just jumped out at me. I mean, I like who knew? So, this is why they say don't disparage Buddhist imagery because you want to be attracted to it in the next life. you know. So, so that's part of it, is we have to be attracted to the teachings to go to the teachings, you know. But and we have to keep working on it because we want to be more than just, oh, isn't that a wonderful statue? You know, that's not going to get us far. Does that make sense? Does that help? So it's both. There's no, I did nothing in this life to create the cause to become a nun. There's no doubt in my mind, but something in the past, in my past lives, and then I met the right conditions, and it just ripened. You know, my first response to a Tibetan Buddhist center when I walked into the Tibetan Buddhist was like, oh my goodness, what's this about? My first teaching in that same Buddhist center was on compassion, and I was hooked. That was all she wrote. Some people's their first teaching's karma. It's like, I'm impressed with anybody sticking around if that's your very first teaching. You know, I have a good friend, not a good friend, that's an exaggeration. I have a fellow nun who first teaching was Highest Yoga Tantra.
What?
She was 21, Highest Yoga Tantra. Yeah.
Isn't that like an advanced talking?
Yeah. But she said she felt like if she hadn't met that one, she probably wouldn't have become a nun. So she was just ready for it.
Isn't that very unusual for that to be someone that has to be that first teaching that somebody?
Well, obviously it's not
Well, not
really
it
the
doesn't
first.
happen. It's not.
Well, I mean, it just means in previous lives she was a lot further along. And she finally met the conditions young, you know, to meet her teacher. Oh, and she met her teacher. He happened to be teaching on Highest Yoga Tantra at the time. You know, she took her initiation. She became a nun, I think, 2 years later, you know, and that's all she wrote. She became his translator and tutor, you know. Now it's 20 years later, 25 years later, 28, I don't know, something like that. This is why they say, don't sit around saying, oh, I can't do it in this life. Because you have no idea what you've done in previous lives. Now, I will grant, I'm 70 now, you know, but a 21-year-old who meets those conditions, I mean, you know, that's pretty good. So anyway, I remember my teacher, same teacher, who used to say, I think, you know, maybe if you haven't realized emptiness and bodhicitta when you're 40, you know, it's going to be a little iffy.
No.
It's not very encouraging.
It is if you understand that we just need to create the cause to meet it again. We don't have to accomplish everything in this life. That's not the project. We just need to keep working with our minds, keep noticing, going, oh, okay, self-interest is there. Yeah, let's work on that. And keep trying to develop, you know, our interest in the Dharma, reading the Dharma. I think it's really helpful, but also, you know, remembering to be kind, to be compassionate, really cultivating those things. If there are people that you have real trouble with, you have to spend some time really thinking about, and how are they different from you? You know, you think about cause and effect, what kind of things they've met in, you know, connected with in this life, and da 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 da. And that same person will have been your mother, your father, your sibling, your child in some previous life. So it's ridiculous how we hold them, you know, in some sort of other category. But we have to work at that. We have to really think about what is the teachings telling us about how we're all connected, and about karma, and about the fact that this mind never ceases, so we've been around forever. You know, so we're not there yet. We want to keep working at it. Because I have a feeling time is not like we perceive it. So,
Tendron,
yeah.
you spoke about nighttime meditation practice. Could
Yeah.
you give a little direction in that regard for when we go to sleep as we close out our day and we anticipate sleep?
Well, in 5 minutes, I can't do it, but I can, I mean, what I've said many times is this idea that we have bookends, right? We set intentions at the beginning of things, at the end of things, we dedicate, and at the end of the day, we want to review our day and acknowledge, take responsibility for any actions that were in the wrong direction that we're taking, and try to generate sincere regret, try to generate the resolve to try to not do it tomorrow, or not do it for the next hour, or not do it, within the first hour that you're awake, however long you can say, or tomorrow, I'm not going to do it tomorrow. And then you review your day for all the things that you were going in the right direction and rejoice how wonderful it is. And then you think about all the people everywhere doing, the constant good actions going on, all the mess. There's also all these people taking care of their kids, all these people helping others, all these, they're just, we couldn't even count the number of positive actions that occur every single day. We want to rejoice about that. That's our Buddha nature manifesting all over the place. So that's a wonderful thing. And then as we go to sleep, we want to remember impermanence, and there's a long meditation on death that will come up in Discovering Buddhism, but I can't do it in 3 minutes. But that experience of letting, when you fall asleep, is the same thing that happens at death, in the sense that your gross consciousnesses are shutting down, so your dream consciousness comes awake, it's a different state. And so you can use that loss of vigor, that you had when you wake up in the morning, and use it as a meditation on our impermanence. That's just a little bitty thing.
Thank you. That helped.
Okay. So let's do some dedications. Let's rejoice. Yay. Yeah. Let's see how this is working now. Okay, go. So take a moment to remember your motivation and rejoice in any positive baby step, big step, anything. Think how wonderful it is. Okay. So now we're dedicating this to be a benefit to others. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may we quickly attain the state of Guru Buddhas and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. Supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen, arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, I too dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. Because of all the merits of the 3 times created by us, all the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and other sentient beings, may there be no wars, famines, disease, quarreling, fighting, or unhappy minds. May there be great prosperity, and may everything needed be easily obtained. May all the human beings in the world be guided by spiritual leaders teaching only Dharma, and may everyone enjoy the happiness of Dharma. The long life of His Holiness. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. With a quick return on Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Oops. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of victorious ones, Shravakos and Pratyeka Buddhists, victorious Losam father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request, while striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, ye suddenly departed to peace, what a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples.